What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another Pioneer video, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Hidden Strings deck for the Pioneer format. It's a combo deck that has been, making changes and kind of metamorphosizing, if that's even a word, for the last probably 2 years since it's been kind of in the forefront of the format. It's kind of dipped in between being like a low tier 1, like a tier 1.5 to like tier 2 deck. And it seems like it's kind of holding steady. It's holding down the roughly like 4th or 5th spot in the Pioneer format. I think it's worth taking a look at just because usually, kind of like most decks that you see in Modern, where they end up being pretty good for a short time and then kind of dying off a little bit, it's usually when people are unprepared or don't understand how the deck works that they usually end up getting caught with their pants down and end up losing this deck. So I think it's worth taking a look at the Hidden Strings deck, so that's what we're going to do today. Of course, if you're not already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more content from me, I do a lot of Modern and Pioneer videos, along with some longer form content. Please consider subscribing and ring the notification bell so you know when those videos get posted. And if you go to the links down in the description below, you'll see a link to the deck list that I have here, and then also the Discord server that I run as well. Please go follow that link and join over there as well. And lastly, please be sure to check out the Casual Spikes podcast as well. We got a few episodes up already. We usually post on Saturdays. We're gonna miss this Saturday coming up because Randy is going to RC Denver and we won't be able to record. Maybe that could change, but we'll see. So, but check out the podcast. Hidden Strings for the Pioneer format is crazy because the Hidden Strings doesn't really tell the story. So, Hidden Strings is a sorcery from Dragon's Maze, where you can tap or untap target permanent, and then you may tap or untap another target permanent, and you can Cipher on something. The Cipher we're not really worried about because this card actually just has a lot more value being in our graveyard than it does actually being exiled, kind of like sort of attached but not really attached to a creature, and getting to cast it whenever we deal damage, whatever. We get to tap or untap a target permanent and then tap or untap another target permanent, so you can target two things and do some dubious things. And we're trying to combo that with cards like Lotus Field, which enter the battlefield tap, you sack 2 lands, and you generate 3 mana of any one color. And so this deck is trying to get 2 of these into play. So you're thinking, okay, so you have to play 2 lands, and then you have to play Lotus Field. Then you have to play 2 lands, Lotus Field. That's like turn 6, and then you still have to, do your combo and everything. So like, how is this deck any good? Well, there's this card called Thespian Stage, which has some kind of sweet Doctor Who art for that Thespian Stage. You can pay 2 mana and tap Thespian Stage, and it becomes a copy of target land, except it has this ability. So in a way, we're trying to play 1 Lotus Field in actuality, and then copying it with Thespian Stage. So we have 2 Lotus Fields in play. We can generate 6 mana, between the 2 of them. And we try to do some busted things from there. So mainly, like with Hidden Strings, you're able to target your Lotus Fields. You generate 6 mana, then you go down to 4. You Hidden Strings, you untap. You have 10 mana now. You have 4 in your pool, and then 2 untapped Lotus Fields. And then you can go and cast like Shimmer of Possibility. You can cast something like a Dark Petition. You pour over the pages. Pour over the pages will kind of help you generate some more mana. It gets to untap 2 lands. You draw 3 cards, and then you discard a card. With 2 Lotus Fields, you generate single mana with this, and you get to draw 3 cards. And you're essentially trying to like loop through your deck until you find Chandra Hope's Beacon. And she says, whenever you cast an instant sorcery spell, copy it. You may choose new targets for a copy. This ability triggers only once each turn. So essentially, you can like play a Chandra, and then you can like Bala Ged Recovery to go get like Hidden Strings and stuff, generate a ton of mana. You can go get like, Bala Ged Recovery. You can go get like a Hidden Strings and something else. And then, you Chandra Hope's Beacon, you minus X, so you end up doing it for -5. Deal 5 damage to your opponent and 5 damage to something else. Whatever. And then it goes to the graveyard. And then if you have another Bala Ged Recovery, you're able to kind of like loop these. So you're able to like Bala Ged Recovery to go get a Chandra, and then play Chandra, and then you play another Bala Ged Recovery, and then you go get like Hidden Strings and a Bala Ged Recovery, so on. So then you're able to cast like Chandra's Hope's Beacon multiple times. If you have a Leer in play, it gets a little bit easier because it gives your instant sorceries in your graveyard flashback, so you're able to cast them for their flashback costs, and if Chandra doesn't trigger, you're able to re-trigger them. So like Bala Ged Recovery, in a way, you can have 2 of them in the graveyard, you cast 1, you target Ball Gate Recovery with Ball Gate Recovery, the other one that's in your graveyard, and like I said, Hidden Strings, or like a Pour Over the Pages, what have you, and, kind of loop those cards until, you're able to win the game with Chandra Hopespeaking. Other ways that you can do this, you have Emergent Ultimatum and Usual Piles. Like, this deck has changed a lot over the years. You can usually get like a Dark Petition, an Omniscience, and like a Leer, depending on, what you have in your hand. And your opponent chooses one to put back, and then the rest go into your graveyard. So you can, they usually put back like Omniscience, so you get like a Dark Petition and a Leer. And, like, if you're able to generate a ton of mana, like, this is going to be perfect, because then you can, Dark Petition for something, like maybe like a Pour Over the Pages. Chances are you're going to have Spell Mastery, so you're going to get 3 black mana, and then you're going to get a Leer, and then you're going to be able to cast like a Pour Over the Pages, untapping your lands, and then getting to at least recast the Pour Over the Pages. So you're going to end up drawing like 6 cards and tutoring for a card that you want, or you could even just like Pour Over the Pages, Ball Gate Recovery, Omniscience, whatever, and then like Ball Gate Recovery to get something back, and then Pour Over the Pages, and then be able to cast Pour Over the Pages again. This deck has so many lines, I can actually feel myself getting like a tension headache just thinking about it, because I am like anxiety ridden like playing this deck, because there's a lot of things that can go wrong. If you do your math wrong, if you don't actually have enough mana or the correct colors of mana, we actually looked at Amulet Titan yesterday, and, I was talking about how complicated that deck can be. This deck can be pretty complicated as well. Again, like, the lines and stuff are pretty straightforward, but when you have to kind of, like, cobble together something, and, like, you're forced to kind of win that turn, and you're sitting there trying to figure it out, it can be pretty hard, because for one, like, obviously, if you don't figure it out, you lose the game. 2, you don't even know if there's actually a solution to it. 3, it usually involves, just like the very thin margins of error to actually, find a win through this pile of cards. And again, like this deck doesn't really have a way that it can catch up kind of once it's behind. You have Impulse and Shimmer possibilities, like your Sylvan Scryings. You're just like trying to look for these lands, your Thespian Stages and Lotus Fields, putting them into play, and then, getting to untap with them and hope that you have enough resources left over that you're able to kind of either cast an Emergent Ultimatum, maybe even hard cast an Omniscience, get a Leer down, and play all those spells that you have in your graveyard, and then get to your Chandra's Hopespeaking. It's kind of hard. Like, this deck is very hard to master, and it's very hard to think of the math and stuff, when instead of just being able to think in, like, raw numbers, you have to keep in mind, like, the colors of mana, like, what you tap your Lotus Fields for totally matters, and could be the difference between, being able to cast a Chandra's Hopespeaking and then continue your loop, to not being able to cast Chandra, or not being able to cast like a Pour Over the Pages, or hell, even be able to cast a Ball Gate Recovery to be able to get back your Chandra's Hopespeaking. So, I mean, there's multiple things that can go wrong, and that's just on the surface level. There's also this Lair of the Hydra, there's a few Beseiju in the deck itself, 2 Otawara. These are kind of ways that you can stall out a game, just even a hair. Like Otawara, just getting rid of like one creature, all you need is like a turn. You just need a turn. This deck can win the game pretty early, with some very specific land draw, like with some very specific draws and some very specific resources. This deck can, I believe, win the game on turn 3. That said, it's inconsistent. This is a combo deck that definitely wants as many turns as it can to kind of sculpt its hand, get ready to go, and then at the last possible minute, it's like, okay, we're gonna go. You're like almost like you're teasing your opponent. You're like, I'm impulsing, I'm shimmering, I'm Sylvan Scrying, getting my thing set up. I'm kind of sitting on these Pour Over the Pages. Maybe I have an Emergent Ultimatum sitting in hand. Like you're just kind of making sure that you're set up so that the turn that you go, it's going to be absolute. You're going to win the game, rather than trying to go for it on turn 3 because you think you can go for it on turn 3, ending up like a mana short, or maybe tapping wrong and getting the wrong color, and then you're just kind of, you've decimated your own board position and threatening to lose the game because you didn't want to wait another turn when you knew that you had another turn, or was very unlikely that you had another turn. That said, with the combination of speed, if you are, confident in playing the deck and you've kind of been in some of those situations before, you are able to try to win the game on like turn 3, turn 4, in certain matchups where it does call for you to like, hey, you got to get your giddy up and go and win the game. So this deck is, I would say, on the harder side, and honestly, like versus like the Titan deck, I don't know how worth it is to get super deep into it and learning kind of like the ins and outs of this deck, because of the position that Pioneer's in, where we have red black midrange being one of the best decks in the format, and then you have like Amelia combo while being, I think, like the third or fourth most played deck. It's just a deck that can win on turn 3 and kind of play underneath kind of like all the stuff that everyone else is playing. You have Is It Phoenix still holding strong, which can put a ton of pressure on you and then kind of force you to win the game pretty early before you're probably even able to actually win the game. So, I mean, this deck, I think, offers very little reward, but it is a little reward in terms of, like, results that you can get, but definitely rewarding as, like, a player, because I think it is a pretty complicated deck. It feels like a pretty big Feel Smart deck. You know, going to the sideboard, you have Silences, you have a Broken Bond, which is a card that I have not seen in a long time. Like, this is a way that you can disrupt your opponent, destroy their Damping Sphere, which you absolutely get hosed by, and then getting to put a land into play as well. It could be like a Thespian Stage, it could be a Lotus Field, you know, just to kind of like get yourself in there. You have Narset's Reversal, which I think is pretty good in the mirrors, because you can just counter their, essentially copy their Emergent Ultimatum, put it back in their hand, and then you have an Emergent Ultimatum. Perilous Voyage gives you some time, also gives you a little bit of scry action on it. Voyaging Satyr, usually these cards, like, I've seen Voyaging Satyrs, or, you know, the other one that, like, you can exert to untap 2 lands. You'd see these, like, in the main. It looks like they've been kind of pushed to the sideboard. Temporary Lockdown is, like, another way that you can kind of give yourself a few, like, a turn or two to kind of set up and go off. You have Maniform Hellkite, which I've actually even seen before. When you cast a non-creature spell, create an XX Red Dragon Illusion with flying and haste. Spend the mana spent to cast a spell, exile that token in combat, or at the beginning of the next end step. That is crazy. That we're going deep. Sunfall can make a big creature, and another Chandra Hope's Beacon is like another way that you can kind of like loop them with the Balaged Recovery and things like that, and getting to cast multiples of them, because if you run out of Balaged Recoveries, your opponent, like, I would imagine this deck probably struggles pretty hard against like Amelia combo after they've comboed off, but you've stopped them from winning. I can only imagine that it's pretty difficult to beat them there. So yeah, that is the Hidden String / Lotus Field combo deck for the Pioneer format. Overall, you know, I have a sweet spot for this deck. I played it when it was like absolutely busted, when you had cards like the thing that gave them not Unearth. Oh my goodness, Underworld Breach. That's what it is. Where you could just like cast these cards and you're playing like Tome Scour in the sideboard, so you just keep milling yourself for a bunch and then untapping your lands and whatever. You know, this deck was like pretty broken and it was super insane. I think turn 3 kills with that deck were pretty common with all the setup and stuff that you had for the deck. Nowadays, like, it's still possible, but it is definitely a lot harder in a format that I think is a lot more hostile to Hidden Strings than, you know, it probably has ever been, you know, to this deck. So if you pick it up and play it, I would play with caution. It's going to be very frustrating the first however many times that you play this deck, simply for the fact that, you know, what your opponents are doing and what you feel like they're doing are going to feel a lot more powerful than what you're doing, and then just being able to navigate those matchups effectively are going to be the difference between actually getting to win those games almost regardless of what they do, versus, you know, ultimately getting defeated and kind of just being off of it. I implore you that if you are going to pick up this deck and play it, you got to be in it for the long haul, and, you know, just kind of accept that, like, sometimes, like, your draws aren't just going to line up with, like, what your opponent does. You know, just, it happens. That's magic. So that's going to do it for me in this video. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like on the video. Comment down below if there's a Pioneer deck that you want me to go over next. Be sure to check out all the other content I have on my channel. Check out the Casual Spikes podcast. Go to the links in the description down below. Check out the deck list, and of course, check out the Discord server as well. Click over the link and join it as well. That's going to do it for me. Hope you all enjoyed the video, and I will see you all in the next one.